So what I'm going to do right now, at least what I'm going to attempt to do, is to walk you through it step by step through the treaty and interchange it with my thoughts and the work that I do. Sweet. All right, let's go. Let's rock and roll. So the high seas. If you have a map, if you've seen the world map, if not, I highly recommend you to grab one and you look at it. And most likely what you see is that most of it is blue. And so like approximately like 70% of it is water. And of that 70%, a little bit more than 60% of it are the high seas. Because the UN likes to give everything a legal name, it calls these areas beyond national jurisdiction, or ABNJs. So these ABNJs are areas that are 200 miles beyond the what they call exclusive economic zone of countries. So within the 200 miles, it's their territories, but outside of it, there's little to no governance. There's some governance related to fishing and mining, but governance to actually protect the biodiversity of these high seas doesn't exist yet, or it's minimal. Yeah, because outside there's little to no governments. Yeah, so that's why why the UN is pursuing a new treaty to do so. Well, it's simple. If you need 3 reasons why we need to safeguard the oceans, reason number 1, we need air to breathe. Marine plants, for example, produce at least 60% of the air we breathe. Reason number 2, it produces a climate we can live in. Yeah. Mostly because the ocean absorbs most amount of the heat from the sun. Yeah. And the reason number 3, which is why we are arriving at the BBNJ, is that it's biodiversity. It's incredible. There's so much life in the oceans that we actually know more about the moon than about what lives in these waters. So simply put, biodiversity generally refers to the number of species types in our oceans. And since our planet is covered mostly in water, it's safe to say that there's an abundance of life or biodiversity in our oceans. Yeah, because these ecosystems make our planet more resilient. It provides what our oceans do is provides better breakdown or absorption of pollution, or it nurtures the planet, gives us food, medicinal resources, more climate stability, and many more things. Yeah, so the BBNJ is the first B in BBN. Oh, sorry. So the biodiversity is the first B in BBNJ. And you need scientific and indigenous knowledge to protect the world's biodiversity. But the challenges right now is to convince the international community of that. Yes, there is. Well, groups like the Pacific Small Island Developing States have been at the forefront pretty much since day one regarding the importance of including traditional knowledge into decision making, and it's in the interest of indigenous peoples to help groups and states like the PSIDs. So yes, we have been through 3 rounds of negotiations, and the 4th and hopefully final round will take place also at the UN headquarters, like I said before, March 23rd to April 2nd this year, which is very soon. Well, I stepped into the process very cold. It's not that the international indigenous movement has known about this process from the very start. I think for me, if I look back at it, serendipity had a major influence. Sure. Sorry about that. I should have started with that. if you're wondering who this little upstart is right here, I'm Ghazali Orella. I have advocated for the rights of the Alifuru people of the Maluku Islands, and indigenous peoples at large in the United Nations for more than 15 years now. I was a kid when my mom took me. I traveled to many places while I actually grew into the movement to the point I'm at today. Yeah. I've trained and mentored a lot of people, dozens of people, to also stand up for indigenous rights, and I was also the lead negotiator for, well, at least what they call indigenous lead negotiator for indigenous peoples when we were operationalizing the UNFCCC's, the local communities and indigenous peoples platform. Yeah, so I'm in this BBNJ process through the International Indian Treaty Council to advocate for the rights of indigenous peoples in these BBNJ negotiations. Oh, right, yes. So when it comes to serendipity, if people don't know what serendipity means, it's like the occurrence of a fortunate discovery, right? Yeah. So the occurrence of a fortunate discovery, which struck me in 2018 when, it was in May 2018, I was in Bonn for the climate change negotiations on the same platform. And during a lunch break, I sat at the table in the cafeteria. So across from me sat a representative of the Federated States of Micronesia. Well, the FSM's representative to the UN mission in New York. And we started talking. And he informed me about that the PSIDs were tracking the negotiations on the platform because of the BBNJ negotiations. So afterwards, I invited him to the Indigenous Coordination Meeting, or what we call the Indigenous Caucus, to explain about the process to all the other indigenous peoples. No. Yes, so that's serendipity. That's why I call it serendipity. And so throughout that conversation, I developed in retrospect, I think I developed 5 reasons why I really wanted to step into this process at this stage. First, I felt that stepping into the design stage would be a very good way to introduce the UN Declaration of Rights of Indigenous Peoples. Second, I felt that the Pacific region, which is my region, our region, I think that our region should be represented, or should be present at least. And fourth, 3 is 4. So another reason is I felt that it was an opportunity to go in and create another enabling environment for indigenous peoples, which I was already attempting to do at the platform negotiations. And I felt the need to prevent the oceans from staying a blind spot to indigenous peoples. So come to think of it, it's actually 4 reasons instead of 5. Yeah, when I talk about us, it's indigenous peoples in general. And then the final one, I think, is that after the platform negotiation, I felt, quote unquote, qualified to do the oceans work and asked the IITC to credential me to actually do the work. Yeah, so that's a little bit my origin story in this process. Now, for me, when I step into a process, especially a new one, and I think that's a very good advice to people that are listening or reading on this particular conversation, is that it's best to articulate for yourself a goal, establish a set of basic principles on how you want to arrive at this goal as well. Because it makes it easier for you to keep yourself in check. And especially when you have to report to others, they can check you as well. So the 5 reasons I mentioned before why I really want to step into this BBNJ process, because it's another opportunity for me to inspire and empower indigenous peoples so that they can do what inspires them. That has been my why, at least the articulation of my why. So how do I want to arrive at this goal? What's my, yeah. I know it's not specific, but it definitely keeps me going. So I deploy I think like 4 principles in this process. I like to see the entire board. I look for ingenious solutions. I always try to do the work, and I always try to focus on a marathon. Well, this is like a mission statement, but I didn't arrive at just like the snap of my fingers. I think if you're interested in articulating in all this, I highly recommend you read Start With Why or Find Your Why, authored by Simon Sinek. Those books really help me and continue to help me in everything I do. Yep. So for me, Indigenous knowledge is the missing piece for the BBNJ. I spoke to a number after developing this whole mission statement. I spoke to a number of Indigenous peoples representatives and organizations, and came up with 3 basic principles to engage into the BBNJ process. 3 basic principles that we need to deploy. First, equity and equality between scientific knowledge and Indigenous knowledge. Yes. So they call it traditional knowledge, but I would like to call it scientific knowledge and knowledge of Indigenous peoples. The second is the UN Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples needs to be the normative framework. And the third one is full, effective, direct, and meaningful participation of Indigenous peoples throughout the entire process. Sure. So the first one, to ensure equity and equality between Indigenous knowledge and scientific knowledge under the BBNJ. I think this is very important because if we want to address climate change and conserve the biodiversity that we still have, we need to bridge traditional knowledge and scientific knowledge. Now, I don't like to use the phrase traditional knowledge because that's not how I would describe the full breadth of our practices, innovations, developments, etc., etc. So that's why I'd rather use the words knowledge of Indigenous peoples. And what the world needs right now is a wider scope of its knowledge, and include a more holistic understanding of the natural world as a start. And that's where the knowledge of Indigenous peoples comes in. We have millennia of knowledge that have proven to be sustainable. Just look in the areas where Indigenous peoples live. You'll see practices and solutions that contribute to the resilience and sustainability of ecosystems in the oceans and other parts of the planet. Yeah, so the second one is to reference the UN Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples as the normative framework towards respecting Indigenous knowledge and our knowledge holders. The declaration was adopted by the General Assembly on September 13th, 2007, and it affirms the basic rights of Indigenous peoples in a number of areas of special concern under the framework of our right to self-determination, like free prior informed consent, which is one of the important provisions that we're going to deploy under the BBNJ. Now, these rights constitutes our minimum standards for our survival, dignity, and well-being. So the declaration being the normative framework is something that I would clarify as a rights-based approach, which brings us to pillar number 3, to ensure the full, effective, direct, and meaningful participation of Indigenous peoples. So what it means is that it needs to focusing on the rights-based approach when it comes to Indigenous knowledge. It is important and appropriate to focus on our right to participate in decision-making. The principle of participation in decision-making has a clear relationship with the right of Indigenous peoples to self-determination, including our rights to autonomy and self-governance, and the obligations of states to consult Indigenous peoples in matters that may affect them, based on the principle of free prior informed consent. So what it basically means is that we have the right to be genuinely involved in state decision-making processes that may affect them, particularly pertaining to knowledge of Indigenous peoples, or how they would call it under the BBNJ, traditional knowledge. I think that's what I demand, what the movement demands and deploys. What we deploy in the negotiations is what I demand and deploy in every meeting that I go to. Yeah, because it adds to, well, if hopefully you agree with me that the broadest knowledge base possible in this treaty is fundamental. This is the once in a lifetime opportunity. All knowledge, it can collect data, inform policymaking and implementation of these policies under the BBNJ. Knowledge is key under this instrument, and we have millennia of knowledge and nature-based conservation measures. Now, it is critical that the new treaty listens to both scientific knowledge and traditional knowledge, knowledge of Indigenous peoples to protect the high seas. Yes. Well, much is still open for discussion. I just came from the meeting in Oslo, and well, the negotiations on the BBNJ is a complex equation. And like I said, the fourth and hopefully final session will take place also at the UN headquarters from end of March to first week of April. During over 2 weeks, and they're organized by 4 elements, as the instrument will consist of these elements. First, marine genetic resources, including questions on the sharing of benefits. Second, measures such as area-based management tools, including marine protected areas. Third, environmental impact assessments. And fourth, capacity building and the transfer of marine technology. So these 4 elements represent parts of what can be best described as a package deal, like a package deal negotiating structure. What it basically means is that nothing is agreed until everything is agreed upon. So because each element represents a very distinct set of goals and issues, they are generally discussed separately in informal sessions during the 2 weeks. And groups like the PCIDs made it a priority that decision-making processes are based on best available scientific and indigenous knowledge. Yeah. Well, I hope you've had a better understanding now of the BBNJ, and I think it's up to us, and by us I mean Indigenous peoples. Yeah, to make support. Yeah, to support them in making states understand, respect, and properly value the indigenous knowledge, and that it is relevant to the collection of marine genetic resources in ABNJs, and in a manner that honors the rights of Indigenous peoples, which includes the right to free, prior, informed consent. So in the current text, we have references to traditional knowledge, even though it's in brackets, and there's a standalone paragraph on access and benefit sharing of traditional knowledge in current paragraph 10 bis. Yeah. We still have to secure the other pillar, the Declaration of Rights of Indigenous Peoples, needs to be the normative framework. So my main role in the negotiations is to provide legal input to the ongoing BBNJ discussions and negotiations about this, how it can be operationalized through participating in the UN decision-making process inside and outside of the UN. So yeah, much work still remains to be done, and yeah, because in the end, what counts is what the document will look like at the final day of IGC4. You're welcome.